Well, good evening. Hello. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the University of Toledo, our Board of Trustees, our faculty, our staff, and our students, welcome to the historic Doermann Theatre. I want to personally thank you for joining us tonight for our second installment of Perspectives. The University of Toledo is proud to partner with The Blade on this new thought leadership series. I especially want to thank Tracy D'Angelo and David Schreeman for their like-minded commitments to lifelong learning that we have here at the University of Toledo. Your University of Toledo is proud of the leadership role we play as an anchor research institution located here in Northwest Ohio. As the regional force powering opportunities to learn, care, work, and play, many in this room tonight are proud alumni or had a family member attend UToledo. There are also those in this room that currently have a family member or friend here with us on campus today as a student. For you to know, we take the responsibility to position our students to be significant contributors of tomorrow across business, healthcare, education, law, research, government, and more very seriously. UToledo is proud of our portfolio of world-class programs, and we are equally as proud of how we connect our faculty and students to our community through partnerships, research projects, experiential learning opportunities, and so much more. Like the namesake of this historic theater, rockets are doers. We apply our expertise to solve real-world challenges through education and collaboration. That's what we are doing here tonight with our panel to discuss the cultural and economic impact of sports. To me, the power of sport is unlimited. Sports can unite people, teach values, inspire hope and pride. I have no doubt this discussion tonight will engage Rocket Nation and the many supporters of intercollegiate athletics in this room and beyond in general. Like you, I look forward to listening and learning from our panelists tonight. That said, it is time to kick things off. It is my pleasure to welcome our Vice President and Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Mr. Brian Blair, to the podium. Thank you for joining us tonight, and go Rockets. Mr. Blair.
Good afternoon. How are we doing? Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to be with you today. One, because I get to speak for a brief period of time, and then for once, I get to sit back and listen to somebody else talk. So excited for this panel. I want to thank President Schroeder and Tracy D'Angelo and the Blade staff for pulling this together. Since I've been in town about 3 years ago, I've talked a lot about this concept of Team Toledo. The idea that the university, our athletic department, and the community are all special. And when we lock arms and we have success together, one wins, we all win. I think there's no better example of that than here tonight on our campus, talking about the topic of sport, but certainly bringing the community and outsiders, as I should say for now, into our family. I would say to our panelists, you are now members of Team Toledo, and that's a really, really good team to be on. We talk a lot about the change happening in college athletics. It's never changed more than it is right now, but amid that change, we've had more success than we ever have. We've won 13 straight championships. We've broken the academic record nearly every semester with every team above a 3.0. We've been voted the best team in our conference for 3 years straight. We've beaten Iowa State, we've beaten Michigan, we've beaten Pitt, we've beaten some incredible brands over this course of period of time. Despite all the change, I promise you, the sky is not falling. While we've had that success, I continue to hearken back to a quote by Nelson Mandela, and I want to read it to make sure I get it right. Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to the youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. I'm the product of sport. I wouldn't be standing in front of you if it wasn't for my experience. From playing sport as a youth to playing in college to ultimately allowing me to get a law degree and go on to a career, I am a product of sport and intercollegiate athletics. But I don't work in sport. I work in educating young people. I work in uniting communities. I work in uniting our alumni and getting them excited and proud to wear that University of Toledo athletic logo. I work in graduating champions who will go on to power the world and certainly transform the world. I work at a university that gives you the power to do, and tonight is a great example of that. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to David, but I'm really excited for the panel tonight, and go Rockets.
Well, good evening. I'm David Shribman. I'm the executive editor emeritus of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the sister paper of the Blade. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be here with my two friends here who I'll introduce. But first, I want to say a little bit about sports, as Brian just did. For as long as there have been humans, there's been sports. Achilles organized athletic contests at Greek funerals. Huge athletic festivals were held at Olympia and Delphi. The Mayans and the Navajos diverted themselves with balls, the latter pioneering a hidden ball game that their priests justified with a fanciful explanation. It mimicked the struggle between the animals of the night and the animals of the day, which I guess now why we have Sunday afternoon football and Monday night football. To my right, but to your left, is Andrew Luck, who needs no introduction, but I'll do so anyway. He's a former quarterback, NFL quarterback, and now is the general manager of the Stanford Cardinal football program. Glad to have you, Andrew. Andrew has to leave a little bit earlier to catch a flight, but we'll get a lot out of him before he goes, I guarantee you. To my left and to the right from your point of view is my great friend Peter Roby, who has been the basketball coach at Harvard, the athletic director at Dartmouth and Northeastern, a member of the NCAA basketball committee, and an all-around great guy whom I've known now for 4 decades. The two empty seats is kind of like a presidential debate where one of the contestants doesn't show up. You know, when Ronald Reagan wasn't able to, Ronald Reagan wanted to have a debate, but George Bush wouldn't show up. There was an empty chair. Well, the empty chairs belong to Nick Lowry, who is a NFL kicker, still holds the record for the most points for the Kansas City Chiefs. The other empty chair is Steve Stoute, who's the president of Canisius University in Buffalo and a former athletic official at Princeton. They just landed on an airplane that was 3 hours late. They'll be joining us. It'll be great to have them, but we're going to have a conversation among the three of us until they get here. Then they can come and correct everything we said. Each of you, I think, Andrew, you want to say hello to someone who's in the audience.
Yeah, Jack Mewhort, my old Colts teammate, housed me last night, so appreciate you, Jack. And Toledo has been on my consciousness for a while. My dad's a Clevelander, but my college roommate, sophomore, junior, senior year is a Sylvania Southview grad, Griff Whalen, also a teammate of mine on the Colts. So I know all about Tony Pacos and Frickers and the Rockets, everything there is to know.
And you, Peter, do you want to say something about your background and why you're interested in this topic?
Well, thanks for inviting me, David, and I'm thrilled to be here. First time in Toledo. Love it. I'll be back. Thanks for having me. I've seen myself as an educator since I got into coaching after I graduated from Dartmouth College in 1979. My coach inspired me by how he coached us because he was an educator first. And so a lot of the lessons that we learned had nothing to do with basketball, but had everything to do with life and being a better person. And that inspired me so much that I wanted to go into coaching. And so I started my career after I graduated from Dartmouth as an assistant coach at Dartmouth. I went to Stanford and coached 1 year there. I was at the military academy at West Point and then ended up at Harvard. Some would say that Stanford is the Harvard of the West. Others would say that Harvard is the Stanford of the East. But nevertheless, I spent 9 years there, and I've always seen myself as an educator, and I wanted to be in sport. I think sport can educate and develop people, and I'm concerned about the trends that we're seeing now in college athletics. And so I'm a member of the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics that's trying to make sure that we continue to do things the right way.
You know, Peter, it makes me think that having gone from Stanford and Dartmouth to Harvard kind of reverses what Darwin had to say, isn't it? Peter, you were talking.
It took a Dartmouth man to straighten the Harvard guys out.
Okay, there you go. So, Peter, you were saying that you're concerned about contemporary sports. What concerns you?
Well, we're not talking about education in conjunction with anything to do with collegiate athletics. We're talking about NIL. We're talking about the transfer portal. We're talking about NLI, NIL. We're talking about all the other things, but we're not really focused on human development, helping people better themselves as people so they can go out in the world and make a contribution. So I know that there's plenty of that going on, but the headlines aren't talking about that. And so my concern is that everybody now associates collegiate athletics with the things that we see in the headlines. And that's not the case. And so it's important for everybody in the room here to know that there's 1,100 plus institutions that make up the NCAA at divisions 1, 2, and 3. And there's about 65 of them that play at the very highest level, especially in football. So that's a very small percentage of the overall membership of the NCAA. And so I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of educating that's going on. There's a lot of learning and developing that are going on at those institutions. And so they have to be considered when we start thinking about what the future of college athletics is as well.
So, Andrew, is this the golden age of college sports, or is this the greatest crisis college sports has ever faced?
That's a good question. I'm not sure it's a golden age. It's certainly a massive crisis. Yeah. And I don't have perhaps the best historical perspective to put it in. But I remember I went back for my master's in education a couple years ago and was reading about Jim Thorpe at Carlisle Indian School. And he also was part of major change in what amateur sports was. So we've gone through periods, I think, in this country of massive change around institutions and cultural institutions and, threads of our fabric that are important to us, like college football, right? It just matters a lot in this country, and it is certainly undergoing change. And my father, who's been in collegiate sports and professional sports in the industry for a long time, describes this as an interregnum. Like, we are in a period between things. I don't think anybody's under the illusion that, that perhaps this House settlement's going to come on April 7th, but it's not going to be the end of the change. It can't be. It won't be. There's too much still going on, and I'm not sure when we're going to settle on some change. But I think to continue the thread as well, that somehow, some way, student athlete probably shouldn't die as a thing. I think it's incredible. I think college sports might be one of the greatest developers of humans that that our country has, especially when we think about leadership or service, whatever that may be. And somehow, some way, the money side of the equation has to be held in a proper tension with scholarship, student, and athlete. So I think that's part of where my mind sits when I take off my Stanford GM hat and the sort of like things I have to do on the daily basis, but when I think about what does college sports look like for the future.
So, Peter, Andrew, to stick with you, explain to all of us what it means to be the general manager or the executive vice president or COO or whatever it is that you are at Stanford football.
I'm not quite sure still. Figuring it out. Well, I'll tell you what I've done so far, and then we'll get a job description out of it. So I started my job. And the transfer portal opened up, right? So we were involved in the recruitment and retention of players on our team, and this is real everywhere. And to give you perspective, and I know Toledo went through many of the same challenges if you're playing, D1 football, but 427 wide receivers entered the transfer portal in the first 2 days, right, of it. So there was mass migration in a sense. Across college football. So dealing with transfer portal.
No tariffs, though, right?
No tariffs.
Oh, okay.
But collectives.
I would say that
collectives.
There's a cost. There's a cost.
There's certainly a cost because money is part of the package. I'll keep talking as folks walk up if that's right, because money is part of the package. So personnel, building a roster, retaining a roster, helping coaches get to the point we need to be. Stanford, like Toledo's an academic, and I'll stop there. What's going on, guys? Nice to see you. I'm gonna pause there, and I'll finish. Yeah, what do you want? Should I finish the thought or pause there?
Well, finish the thought.
Stanford, like Toledo, is an academic institution with stakeholders beyond the sports world, and making sure that our administration and faculty is aligned with where we want to go as a program. And I'll stop there then.
Okay, so two other people just invaded this stage. They were invited, so don't be troubled. They were invited guests, but they were a little bit late. Did you have a? You should have a. Nick, you should have a thing. How was your flight?
I think one of the subtexts of today's talk is, as Andrew would know, whether it's a blitz against him and the Indianapolis Colts, life is unpredictable. We had a 3-hour delay, but here we are.
And so this is Nick Lowry, who still, as I said earlier, still holds the scoring record for the Kansas City Chiefs. Who are you rooting for Sunday? Well,
Kansas City, it's a beautiful thing, and we have to kind of give thanks because it's such a rare thing to witness the first team ever to be in 5 Super Bowls in 6 years.
There you go. Okay.
And won a few too.
And Steve Stoute is the president of Canisius University, the Jesuit college and university in Buffalo. He is a former athletic official at Princeton and also at USC, I think. And we're delighted to have you here. And one of the things we want to learn from you, Steve, is how smaller universities that have the values and commitments to sports are handling this whole situation. So you walked in as Andrew was talking about being the general manager at Stanford. So that's a whole different situation. Why don't I ask each of you interlopers here to say a little bit briefly about your perspective and how sports affects your institution and shaped your life. So why don't we go first with you?
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. Sorry for the tardy arrival. I think how sports impacts Canisius University and our student athletes, and some of the perspective you'll likely hear from me as well is shaped by the fact that I played a Division I sport. I went to Seton Hall University and played soccer there, but also very different. Right, soccer is a non-revenue sport, it's an Olympic sport, and so much of how I think about leading the institution and the role athletics plays at a Division I institution and on our campus is shaped by that experience. For us, 25% of our undergraduate students, so we are a small university, are student athletes. Right, so that is a significant proportion of our undergraduate student population. And those students come to Canisius because we offer an excellent educational experience. That's why they're there. That is not to say that our student athletes don't work incredibly hard and give their best on the field, on the court, in the pool, and strive to be as competitive as possible. But their focus, while at Canisius, is being well-rounded human beings and getting the best possible educational experience that they can. So I think about athletics in our Jesuit tradition as part of our obligation to educate the whole person, mind, body, spirit. And so that is what our athletic department staff understand, that's what our coaches understand, and the expectations are academics first, be engaged in our community, service to the institution, service to our community, be good citizens of the university and in Buffalo. And if it works really well and you are exceptional, then we will support you in whatever way we can in your athletic pursuits. But it is in that order and only in that order. And I hope any of my student athletes sitting up here would say they understand that very clearly.
Now, you know Nick Lowry for being the guy who stands there at the great moments with the game on the line and kicks the field goal. I've known Nick Lowry for 50 years, and here's some things about Nick you don't know. That he has, no, these are good things. Now, you calm down. He is a pioneer in working with and for the homeless. He's put a human face on the homeless in Phoenix at St. Vincent de Paul Shelter in Phoenix, 110,000 homeless over the last 19 years. He's a founding member of Project Max, dedicated to ending racism, anti-Semitism, and intolerance through sports. So, in a way, besides your own career, sports has given you a forum for your second career. Isn't that right, Nick?
I think sports is the purest form of meritocracy. It is one of the last stages where we can prove that we can play together and work together and grow as human beings. I'm very proud. We have a couple Dartmouth people here of the tradition, recognized at the Ivy League football banquet on Thursday night with Buddy Tevens, and the fact that all of his players over the many years he coached there, our head coach who passed away just in the last year, engendered that interesting word into every fiber of his being and every fiber of every DNA cell in his players, which was character, which was learn how to work hard, learn how to be a teammate, learn how to get up when you have been humiliated. For me, learn how to come back from a missed field goal, which is probably the most humiliating and public demonstration you can have. I'm sure an interception isn't very fun, but as a kicker, you don't have a third down and a fourth down. You just have to keep finding a way to get back up. And I believe that sports has become more important to teaching those values of character, so that, frankly, children make the right decision that when money, and we're talking for some millions of dollars, the average salary for LSU and Alabama starting football team was a year ago $20,000 a month. Somehow to me, to express character is to make a better choice even when there's a really nice choice that has to do with money over here. You don't sacrifice the things that will help you for a lifetime. So to me, that's the challenge that we're going to talk about tonight, which is, how do we maintain the experience of growing in character and contribution and service to your community and to your team? You learn at a fundamental level. You don't sabotage your development as a human being, even as the scourge of money, as well as the wonderful opportunity for outlasting what many in my NFL career would call generational poverty, right? It's a temptation, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's out of control right now and has to, I think, find a better balance.
This is a diversion, I know, but I was wondering, after having heard you speak, missing a field goal in your life as a basketball player, missing a field goal in yours, getting intercepted, how do you learn from failure? And is that one of the teachings of sports?
Absolutely. I think sports provides an incredibly safe space, and I don't mean that in a negative way or a bad way, but it's one of the few psychologically safe spaces that we learn to fail. It's something I processed and thought a lot about after I retired from the NFL, and it was what brought me back to go get a master's in education, was thinking about the importance of sports, growing up in sports, the importance of coaches, the importance of the men outside of my father that coached me and provided guidance and mentorship. And you fail, and it's honestly part of what I miss most about playing sports is not the throwing of the interception, which I did a lot, including against the Chiefs, too many of them, but the moment of the inflection point about, okay, can you go back, can you step back on the field, and what are you going to do about it? Can you grow? And it's great listening to Nick. I mean, part of my thesis going back to school, and I volunteer high school football coached, was like, oh my gosh, sports seem more important today at the youth level, at the high school level, and then I think what's so difficult at the collegiate level is the tension with money right now. We'll get to that. But it was part of my thesis, like, oh my gosh, these boys especially, but everybody, they need sports and the extracurriculars more today than perhaps, we're all the same age, right? But more than when we grew up, before.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. So that's my soapbox about how important sports are. But I agree with it.
Now, Peter, you had one very trying season as a basketball coach. How many games did you win?
More than one.
Pardon me?
Well, when I was at Dartmouth, we were 4-22 as a student.
Right.
My sophomore year, we were 4-22.
Now, was that a good experience?
Well, here's the thing. I'm still really close friends with most of the guys on that team. My coach is still important in my life. Okay? But here's the thing. We were 4-22 as sophomores. Okay? We were 10-16 as juniors. And then we were 14-12 as seniors. So whatever we learned and how we stayed together, we put that into practice and benefited from that. And because guys like me played less and less, and guys like Larry Lawrence, who was the player of the year in the Ivy League, played more and more, we won more games. But my coach helped me to appreciate the role that I could play, even in practice, to make us better.
And who was your coach?
Gary Walters.
And we'll get to Gary Walters in a minute with you.
Okay? Education through athletics. That was his theme at Princeton for 20 years as the athletic director. And he inspired that in me. I wanted to be a coach because of Gary. I wanted to be an educator who happened to use basketball to educate. And so 4-22, 10-16. Let me just give you one more story. When I was the athletic director at Northeastern, our women's soccer team was playing a home game against Boston College. Boston College, ACC program, much bigger, more funded, whatever. And we had never really been able to crack that nut to beat them. And now we're up 1-0, and the game is in the final 30 seconds. They've got the ball on the far side. They inbound it, and for whatever reason, they were able to get the ball deep, and they chipped it. The goalie goes up, and there's only 6 or 7, 8 seconds left, and she misplays the ball, and the ball goes into the net, and they score, and we lose in overtime. Okay? So I'm at the game. So the next day, where my office was located at Northeastern was as the academic, from the academic center, the students would come before they went down the stairs to go out. So I had a clear view of everybody, and I did that on purpose. And I see the goalie coming the other way, and I give her this. So she comes in the office, and you know, you can imagine how she's feeling. And so I asked her, "How are you doing?" And she said, "It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to think that you let your teammates down." I said, "Okay, so what I want you to remember is that you're going to benefit from this, and we're going to need you later in the year. And so you have to let that go and keep working and believing in yourself." Well, we go on to win the CAA championship, and we go to the NCAA tournament. And so I'm there at the end of the game when we clinched the CAA championship, and who do I go see first? I go see her. And she's got this big grin on her face because she knows what I'm thinking. Big hug, and I say, "I told you that you were going to have another opportunity, and if you learned from it, it would make you better." And that's what this is all supposed to be about. The thing about failure is, in athletics, you fail in public. A lot of people fail, but nobody knows. You have a bad lab at school, only one that knows is the professor.
Try making a mistake in your nationally syndicated column. Now, Nick, I've noticed that when a field goal kicker misses a kick, his teammates almost always go around him, go to him, give him a little bit of a hug or a little bit of something. What did you learn from those moments, and is that part of the whole thing about being in sports? I don't mean to linger on the times you missed field goals.
Yeah, hopefully it didn't happen too often, but it did. And really what you learn is, of course, appreciation. Your teammates look at you as a body of work, and that your body of work, for the most part, is incredible preparation and then, of course, execution. But in the end, they don't care about your excuses. So what they notice is, are you going to make an excuse? The joke is, of course, laces out, right, and pointing at the hole. If you do that, you are never going to play again. You learn to not make excuses, to learn, which is what school's about, isn't it? It's about teaching the habit of higher learning. I'd like to redefine higher learning as the higher value learning as well. that the hardest thing is to come back from difficulty. I was cut and rejected by 8 teams 11 times. And I actually took a job in the U.S. Senate for Senator Bob Packwood on aviation safety. And the Chiefs
They
called.
could use it this week. Yeah.
And the Chiefs called. Yeah, there you go. They could have. And the Chiefs called, and I just, something in me, which is part of this learning, is to listen to this intuition. I call it a godly thing in my view, but it's growing in spiritual intuition about what is the higher choice. And I gave up a job, which is a great job in the Senate, to try one last time, and I played 18 years, became most accurate kicker in NFL history, only because I had people that were mentors, like a Pete Roby. I bet you that Andrew is a tremendous mentor at Stanford. I'm sure, having spent 3 hours waiting at the airport and seeing the way he handled this, Steve is as well. So it's listening to the proper people, surrounding yourself with the right people, and then in the end, living with yourself to make the best choices in life and owning your stuff when it's the wrong choice too.
It's the thing that I'm most proud about Nick is how he dealt with failure, that he still believed enough in himself that he had the kind of career that he had, because it didn't start out that way. And so we're all really proud of that.
So, Steve, you're an educator. You've listened to these 3 guys talk about what they've learned from sports. Tell me your reaction to all that and your own experience. Because I'm sure maybe once or twice you kicked a ball that didn't go quite the right place.
Never. I think they're all absolutely right. And whether it's for our student athletes or for our students in general, what we talk about and what we try to incorporate into how we educate our students is, particularly in this post-COVID reality, is resilience. Right? Our young people, they need to learn and understand how to be resilient. How do you recover from setbacks? Because that is the one certainty in life. No one bats 1,000. No one has a perfect quarterback rating every game. No one shoots 100% from the free throw line or from behind 3. There will be setbacks in your life. How do you react? How do you respond? We heard Nick's story. That's life. That is what life is about, and that is what we are trying to do through education. And we do it in the way by putting our students into situations where that is more likely to happen. Right? My dad always said, the goal is not to be the smartest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. Because how do you get better? Right? You get better by being around people who will challenge you and push you and force you to get outside your comfort zone.
So I'm going to do one more round with each of you and then go to your questions, which I can already tell are fabulous. Andrew, is there anything about this new world that you're in now that you find uncomfortable? And do you fully approve of where we're going right now?
I'll get to that. I also have to leave in 10 minutes. I'm very sorry. I booked all this, and then I found out I have to present at a Board of Trustees meeting at Stanford tomorrow morning.
Oh, who's more important than this group?
So I might take up a little of the oxygen here for the next 5 to 10 minutes, and maybe we chat as well. Do I fully approve of everything right now? No, the system is not set up in a way that is benefiting enough people, and it does seem like the education, especially top level college football, basketball, the two sort of economic behemoths of this. Maybe education is not getting valued as it should everywhere, and that not enough folks are winning at this, and maybe sort of like higher winning, or I've heard some call it double goal winning. Are you winning at life, or are you winning at your sport? Now, I will also go back. Deeply also on principle, I am so happy that young men and women can make money off their name, image, and likeness in college. It's a long time coming, and thank God for it. I also think that revenue share is the right thing to do, especially in major college sports. As you guys know, college football is big business, and it's not like head football coaches are making the salary of a professor. They're making $9, $10, $11, $12, $13 million, and I think it is only right and fair that those young men on the field, guys playing basketball, are allowed to participate in receiving a cut in that. So that is the principle that I hold. And we're not in a place that is satisfying for enough of the stakeholders and adhering to enough of the values that I do think make college sports so special, especially in America. And I grew up overseas. My wife, her parents, escaped Czechoslovakia in 1986 during communism, right? She got a scholarship to go to Stanford to be a gymnast. That was their version of the American dream, and my wife got to live it, right? And my sister-in-law got to go pole vault at Brown. And I actually think the Ivy Leagues are going to be an interesting sort of case study as every ebbs and flows. But I will say from my seat, from my seat as the GM, I'm putting my GM hat on of Stanford, and I do not mean this in a snotty or an elitist way, but we have to at Stanford, if we're going to survive this, we're going to have to hold education, athletics, and the financial part, getting paid to play big time game or getting in a proper tension. We're going to have to, and too much money is made on college football for me to go out and say to our guys, including when I played. Too much money was made when I played to say you don't deserve a cut of that. That does not sit right to me at all. Now it also doesn't sit right to me to say, hey, don't worry about going to class, ever. You're here to be a professional athlete now. That's the pendulum swinging completely the other way. And so I do want to believe, and this might be the pie in the sky thing, that we will find a system that, I think higher learning is an interesting way to call it, that makes sure we're still honoring the higher learning of sports, that we're honoring what an education can do, and that we're honoring the real money that is being generated around this, right? And that's certainly a big part of it, and a big part of what change is happening and change still to come. But I want to believe we can get to a place that sort of holds those three in the appropriate tension and still allows us to have college football that we love so much and that we care about. And I keep thinking, if in my mind I do a little bit every now and then, okay, an alien came down to Earth and you got to explain college football or college sports to him. Where do you start? And I think the first thing I would say was, all right, don't try too hard to understand it. Some of it just doesn't make sense, right? Why this school, Ohio State, refuses to say Michigan when they talk about the school. It's the school up north. That doesn't make sense to me. And that's okay. I think that's part of what we love about it. It is this allegiance to these universities. So I'm not happy with the current system. It is the Wild West, as many people say. But I do think it is a step in a direction that had to happen. And part of why it's so messy is I think the NCAA and the structure didn't change for so many years, and then all of a sudden the dam broke, and now we do have to find a way to a resting spot.
Well, since we have a few more minutes with you, how does Canisius University and Stanford University survive, or both of them at the same time, with the kind of values that Stanford has and the kind of values that Canisius has and the values that we have here at UT? How does all that get reconciled? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I'm curious where football is going. And I think football, obviously I played football, so that's the prism through which I look at most things. But I think football is both. And then maybe not Canisius, because you don't play football, so yeah, we'll both survive. For sure, absolutely.
From your lips.
Yeah, but football is both the engine and the perversity in college sports right now. It's been this engine that has driven so much of the system that has, my sister played volleyball in college. My brother played soccer in college. We know someone who's played. My cousins play. One plays soccer at Grinnell in Iowa. D3 loves it. It's an incredible experience. High school teammates played at DePaul in Indiana for in the Monon Bell. So, but football is such an engine. It's also a perversity right now. Our teams at Stanford are flying to the East Coast for their conference games. That's a challenge. That's tough, and it boils down to football. So I am curious if there's an untethering at some point of football, and if it makes another system easier, or more attainable for folks. And so that I certainly don't have an answer on. The other thing I think about a lot is I had distinct pleasure of being in Paris for the Olympics this year because my wife's a producer for NBC. And I was also incredibly proud on gymnastics. So if you watch gymnastics, that was what my wife was working on, and I'm really proud of her. And obviously the U.S. men and women did so well. But Stanford had 59 Olympians, right? 30-something Americans and a bunch of others, including classmates of mine. I watched Katerina Stefanidi pole vault for Greece. She won a gold medal in Rio. Like, how cool is that? We were in the training room together. My freshman classmate, Eric Shoji's on the volleyball team. But our collegiate system has provided our country the most incredible training ground for Olympic elite athletes, right? That is totally different than how any other country does it with direct federal funding for what they do. So we can't throw that out with the bathwater when we think about college sports, but we do have to honor the economic engine that is football and those players that are generating that economic, Right.
I think we can all agree that we're very grateful, not only for Andrew's trip across the country, but for his contribution to this conversation. Really, really thank you so much, and we wish you well, and good luck on your...
I appreciate it. I'm so sorry to have to dip out. I will say, I see a question here before I go. It's about gambling in college sports, and I'm just going to answer it real quick.
Okay. That's good. Good.
Prop bets are bad. And they're very bad for college sports. And I think there has been success in making sure that, because imagine you're sitting in, imagine you're on the soccer team or on the basketball team, and someone comes up to you in the cafeteria and knows that you have a game 2 nights, and they say, hey, can you miss the first free throw for me? Right? And, give you $50. Whatever, right? That is a bad thing for college sports. I'm not saying all our gambling's bad. I mean, that's a massive industry. There's got to have to be rules, right? But prop bets, I know for sure, is a problem. So that's what I'll leave you guys with.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew.
Great to meet you.
Thank you, Steve.
One of the things I just wanted to mention about Andrew talking about football is that on the Knight Commission, we made a recommendation in 2020 about separating football from the NCAA so that it would be managed and governed by itself, separate from the rest of NCAA sports, because it's created this issue that we have now with conference realignment and media deals and all that kind of stuff, where schools are talking to each other in boardrooms saying that they're going to stay together when they've already made a decision that they're leaving. That's happening all over the country. And so we've compromised a lot of our values around collegiality and integrity for the sake of making more money and going to another conference. So the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics made that recommendation 4 years ago, that there should be a totally new governance structure separate, and that the distribution of revenues should be recalibrated to take the football distribution out of the equation so that more money goes back to other non-football playing institutions like Canisius or Northeastern, where I was for 16 years.
Nick, I'll get to you in a second, but first I want to ask you, Steve. This is from one of our attendees here. When you look into your crystal ball, what changes do you see in the relationship between the NCAA and teams that make up not the Power Five? And just talk to us a little bit about the questions you and your board are facing now.
I think Peter hit on it, Andrew hit on it. There needs to be a bifurcation of Division I, right? So we're talking about Division I athletics when I look into the crystal ball. And the good news is you won't get to sit here and see me disagree with Andrew Luck. I think some of what he said is absolutely right. But for institutions like Canisius that don't play football, and the vast majority of Division I institutions are like Canisius and not like Alabama, not like Stanford, not like Ohio State. Right, and so the Autonomy 4 conferences, they are the minority in the NCAA, but they wield significant power, and they want more, right? Because what is making the system fall apart isn't the revenue that's being generated and not shared with our student athletes. What's making the system fall apart is at the NCAA convention, right, when all of our NCAA member institutions get together, Canisius University has one vote on matters that impact Division I. Ohio State, one vote. Alabama, one vote. That does not sit well with my colleagues at those institutions. That is why the system has to change. What we at Canisius want out of college athletics isn't the same. Our goals are very different. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying to my colleagues who lead and govern institutions in the Autonomy 4 conferences, you can govern, manage, administer college athletics as you see fit. What is holding us together, and I'm really interested to hear Peter talk about this, is the men's basketball tournament, right? When I look into my crystal ball, what I've said to my board is this is the last year that we will see a men's basketball tournament the way we know it. The last year. Peter talked about his team winning 4 games, and then 10 and 14. My head men's basketball coach had to recruit 12 new guys this year because they all left. There's no staying together for institutions like us. You don't build a team, you don't build a program. You have 1 year, if you're lucky. This is the end of the men's basketball tournament. March Madness, March Sadness, perhaps, because we don't play football. And what we know, what the data tells us, 10 million people tune into every broadcast window the first week of the basketball tournament. From 11 a.m. till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. the next day of their overtime games, there's a basketball game on. And you're not tuning in to see see the spread between the number 1 and the number 16. It's can the 16 beat the number 1? Can the 15 beat the number 2? Right? That's what you're tuning in to see. They need us. They need us. They may not acknowledge that, right? But they need us. So that's the crystal ball, unfortunately. So tune in come the middle of March. Soak up all the college basketball you can, because this may be the last time you see it like this.
I'm stunned. You lost all 12 members of your basketball team?
Both men and women.
Wait, 24 people on the portal, huh? I'll get to why don't you react to some of that, Peter, and then I'll ask a question for Nick.
Yeah, I agree totally with what Steve's saying. When you have conferences that have 20 members in it, they want as many spots in the NCAA tournament as they can get. So they're the ones that made the decision to realign, right? So they left where they were. Think about this for a second. Cal and Stanford had nowhere to go. 2 of the best academic institutions in the world, and nobody wanted them? What does that tell you about where college athletics is? All right? So I'll just put that out there for a second. But realignment was always to chase the money. And so they get 18 teams in the SEC. And now the SEC is really good, and now they want as many spots in the tournament as they can get. So they want to now start thinking about taking the automatic bids away from those conferences like where Northeastern and Dartmouth and Canisius play in. So the compromise is now you're starting to hear them talk about expanding the field. All right? So now they're talking about going from 68 to 72. They're talking about going from 68 to 76. That's all to make sure that the major conference folks get as many teams in the tournament as they think they deserve. Because they don't think that if Canisius wins their conference, that they deserve to take a spot away from the 14th team in the SEC. The team that finishes 14th in the SEC feels like they deserve it, and who's to say they don't? But I agree with Steve. The tournament's going to change, and the only reason that we're not already getting another division is because of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. If people could figure out a way to manage that, we would have that already.
So, Nick, not to make you feel old, but you graduated from college 46 years ago. Does this sound...
Reality.
Nick, I wasn't even born yet.
You have much to learn, my son.
So, Nick, does this sound like an alien world to you? What these guys are talking about, does it sound like an alien world to you?
No, because in the NFL you saw this. I'm going to make a couple comments on, first of all, we've got to talk about women in sports too.
That's my next question.
But I do want to mention a comment about, we talk about money, talking about the bullying of the big boys against the smaller institutions. I'm walking down the stairs in Kansas City at the Plaza 3 restaurant, and I'd made 2 field goals that day, last game of the season. I'd missed 1. It was actually, to be honest, it was the first and only field goal ever that was good that they called no good. It was so cold that referee must have looked wrong, but it didn't matter. We won 34. We won 34-10. We won. We finished. And I'm going down the stairs, and someone walking up the stairs said something I'd never heard before. He said, "You blew the over and under." I didn't know what that was. As a kicker, imagine the stupidity and the pressure if you're open to someone trying to influence you like that. Anyway, so I stayed as far away from it as I could. But it made me realize that the people that seem to care the most, to get most angry, most emotional, they don't care about you, and they don't care about your team. They care that they lost money. And that's kind of a dirty, maybe not great secret. So I kind of dismiss the people that get so upset that way because they're not in it for the right reasons. They're just trying to make money. The second thing is to talk about women in sports. I have a twin sister, and Title IX started right about that time, 1974, 72, 73, right? And the character, I mean, who has forgotten the U.S. women's soccer team who, many of whom had children, were told that as mothers they wouldn't be strong enough and tough enough. They come back and win the World Cup, right? Women who play sports are mentally tougher. They've learned, just like we in men's sports have learned, to play as a team. It's a beautiful thing to watch, and we can't lose that. And it's going to be a strong pressure. We're talking about the pressure of money to justify that it's based on how much money you bring and viewership against the fact that it just is too important. What we've learned from Title IX, what we've gotten from Title IX, the women that have experienced being part of a team, it is just so fundamentally powerful. And I know that we have to move in that direction because it's just too important. So I just make my stand there for my twin sister and for all for women's sports too. We're going to have to figure out that piece of that with respect for, you know, an important piece that we may well lose.
Those are the decisions that athletic administrators are wrestling with right now. That's what Brian and his staff are wrestling with right now. So you want to be competitive in FBS football, right? We want to do some sort of revenue share with FBS football, all right? So what's the cost of doing that? Not just the cost of how much money you have to raise and you want to share with your football team, but are you going to have to take resources away from other sports in order to do that? And now, if that's what you have to do, is everybody okay with that? No. Okay, so that's part of the equation and the balance that everybody's going through in college athletics. So when your football team is not as good as you would like them to be careful how much pressure you end up putting on certain people, because maybe they're trying to keep that balance in order. There's decisions that have to be made every day. And sometimes it's going to result in your football team maybe not being quite as good as you'd hope they would be.
For the record, I want to tell the audience that we had invited Christine Brennan, sports writer for USA Today, to join us this evening, and she couldn't make it because she's finishing up her biography of Caitlin Clark.
And she sends her best, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Great. Oh, I didn't know you knew her. Okay. Anyhow, Steve, you and I went to see the Duquesne Canisius women's basketball game a couple of weeks ago. That was as good a game as you could see anywhere, and there weren't enough people in the crowd. Why not?
I struggle with that. As president of Canisius, I have the good fortune, and I'm blessed to serve on the NCAA Committee on Women's Athletics. I am the father of the only girls, so I'm a girl dad. So women's athletics is really, it is personal to me. And I remember my head women's basketball coach trying to find me after the game, and because she'd not considered, and she's a first-year head coach, that the president of her institution would travel to go support the women's basketball team, right? It's a really unfortunate place we are in, where we as a country, we as a society, do not value women's athletics the way we should. Andrew, when he was here, talked about the Olympics and his colleagues at Stanford who've gone on to perform in the Olympics. And when we look at Olympic rosters, and so many of our female athletes far excel and outpace what our men do. And it is directly linked to 1972 and Title IX. And this is probably the most complex part of what is happening in college athletics now, is how do we, Andrew talked about holding things in tension. I don't know if this tension can exist in reality. I do not know if the decisions that are being made about revenue sharing at the highest level are considering the impact, downstream impacts on the volleyball player, or the women's soccer player, or the women's gymnast, because Peter talked about it, right? And the hardest thing for me is the NCAA is a membership-led institution. These decisions are being made by presidents. And I sit and I think, my colleagues are making these decisions, right? And Nick and I talked about it on our commute here. The women's soccer player at Stanford or at Cal or at USC has to play 2 games on a weekend. So you're playing Friday and Sunday in Piscataway, New Jersey, because USC is in the Big Ten. So they got to go to Rutgers. So to get there for Friday, you leave on Thursday. Leave on Sunday afternoon after a game, you're getting back to LA late in the night on Sunday. So you go to class on Monday exhausted, you go to class on Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe half day Thursday. So I know I didn't hit the nail on the head, but the consequences are so grave for all of our athletes, but for our women athletes as well. And this is a time where we should be pouring more resources into women's sports, right? Because look at what the WNBA has done. Look at what WUSA has done. If we invest in women and in women's athletics, our society benefits. And there's so much data to prove it. And we are going in the inverse direction. And I cannot explain it.
We received, do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. Just pushing back, because this is about wrestling with difficult topics. That's what we do at higher learning, right? The athletic director at the University of Central Florida, who's a good friend, was shaking his head as I walked into his office. We were hosting the Hula Bowl there, which we'd moved from Hawaii, and he's shaking his head. I said, what happened? He said, I just had a mother just tell me, if you don't give me $200,000 for my son, he's not going there. That's happening every day, multiple times. That's why, I guess, 12 people are leaving. And look what happened at the University of Arizona State that brought in 40 new players. So it's gone from being a portal to being a river of movement, and it's destabilizing programs, but it's also the predictability. If you have an economic model, it must be just completely destroyed. You don't know how much money you're going to have to spend to win. So you've got a woman mother of a male athlete saying, I need 200 grand or else he's not coming, and you've got the women on the other side that deserve this powerful experience that will help them the rest of their lives and help society itself work through tough times, including in families, because we know all marriages have their challenges, families have their challenges, managing children has its challenges, and they shouldn't be deprived of that lesson and that ability to lean on teammates as well.
Did you talk to any of these 24 deportees?
Again, we are a small institution, and so I have the good fortune of getting to know so many of our students and our student athletes. And so I tell prospective students often when they come to Canisius, you don't come to Canisius to hide. There is no lecture hall of 100. You will walk down the hall and your faculty members will call you by name. And the hazard for you is the president might call you by name. And so if you want to hide, Canisius is not the place for you. Now, if you want to be a part of a community where people know you and are invested in you personally and your success, that's what we offer. So I had a number of conversations with those students. And again, Nick and I were talking about this. I often think to myself, I can't be my dad, but I think, oh, I'm the old man in the rocking chair. Get off my lawn. No, I understand that their challenges are very different than mine were when I went to college 25 years ago, and I don't begrudge them the opportunity to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. Right?
But you can't afford to have them do it at your place.
Not at Canisius.
No.
So we acknowledge that, right? There are only so many student athletes who are going to leave college and go play pro sports. Andrew and Nick are here, and they're examples of that. But the vast majority, like this guy, are going to find something else to do with their careers. So if you have a limited window of athletic excellence to capitalize on, then that is fair for you to pursue that. I asked each and every one of them that I spoke with to promise that they would graduate, because the probability of going pro is so slim. It is okay to chase the dollars. I don't agree with it, but it is okay to chase a few dollars. It is short-sighted if you do not graduate, because you have to prepare for life after sports.
Just as an estimate, Nick, what percentage of your teammates over those 16, 18 years graduated from college?
50%, probably.
And how did their lives later change, one for the better or for the worse, for those who didn't graduate?
It's hard not to get emotional because you just know. First of all, CT, let's throw CT into that with football as well. Losing some of the best people I've ever known. An interesting insight into that is the guys that had their act together. DNA is so powerful. My teammates that were good people and good husbands, all their kids are Division I athletes or pro athletes. I mean, I can tell you, Gary Spaney, Mike Bell, his son Blake Bell playing for the Chiefs, and on and on. So there's a connection there, right, with having your stuff together and realizing the application of hard work and focus and discipline and being a team player and being what I call a small E athlete, small ego athlete, translates to everything in life. Those that didn't learn that, first of all, often, Pete, you might agree with this, maybe, the best athletes often don't make the team at all because they haven't learned to work through the tough times and to make it to that next level where they aren't that good for a while. It might take several years. And those people, unfortunately, I fear for them. We had a guy, I'm going to mention his name, I love him to death, but Don Parrish, back in 1980, I come to the Chiefs, and every player had, the defensive line, Sylvester Hicks and Art Still and Don Parrish had shaved their heads, and they had arrowheads shaved on the side of their heads. It was a rather amusing sight. And Don would cash his check on Monday, because you go into the stadium the day after a game, you cash your check, and he'd spend it all by Friday. Where do you think he is today? That's when the average salary, my salary as a rookie was $30,000, right? The average player in the NFL is now close to $4 million. It's a very different thing, but you can waste $4 million just as easily as $30,000. That's another thing. 80% of athletes today, within 3 years of leaving the game, have marital and relationship issues and have bankruptcy issues. have serious financial issues. That directly goes to that. So, I always circle back to the idea of the coach and the mentor to foster that mentoring relationship. To me, that's what higher learning should be about. How do we create a mentor-rich environment where coaches, professors, the staff on universities, the coaches, obviously, all the teachers in high school, to help kids then learn their lessons, make lots of mistakes, and then come back and give the best lesson of all. Talk to your university, come back to your teammates, the new teammates, the young 18, 19-year-olds, and say, I screwed up, here's how I screwed up, don't make the same mistakes. And by the way, I did figure it out eventually, and this is the better choice.
Like the song says, don't do what I have done, right?
And that's often more powerful.
Many of you in the audience know Tracy D'Angelo, who's in the front row. She's the president of the newspaper division of Block Communications, which owns The Blade. And about 20 years ago, we ran a program much like this, not as good actually, in Pittsburgh about sports. And I put together the panel, and I said, we're going to have a guy named Don Schwal here. And she said, well, who the hell is Don Schwal? And I said, well, he was Collier Stremski's roommate in 1961 and Rookie of the Year for the Red Sox in 1961. And she said, well, this isn't 1961 anymore. I said, well, this is going to be okay. Okay. So we're sitting up here, we have a conversation, and the conversation goes to exactly to what you were saying, Nick. And I said to Don Schwal, who became a financial advisor, Don, why do so many athletes end up in bankruptcy? And he said, oh, it's easy, David. Money talks. It says goodbye. What he just said about you at Northeastern, very different kind of place than Harvard. The people at Harvard will be the first ones to tell you that. Did they all graduate? How did they value their education differently? And what were the outcomes?
We had 24 straight semesters of a 3.0 or higher average for our student athletes. We had, my goal was that we weren't going to compromise. That there was nothing that said you can't be good in athletics and also be good academically. I refused to believe that. That was my mantra. Coming out of the Ivy League, that's what we believe in, is that there's a balance between academics and athletic success, and you can be great in both. You can aspire to be great in both. And I wanted that for Northeastern. And so we worked really hard on the culture to create a culture that was nurturing, that was all about development, is about people treating each other the right way, and that we were going to respect the student athlete. So long before everybody was talking about, giving the athletes a voice, we were trying to do that because we recognized that they needed to be treated like adults. So I would tell the kids when they came in for orientation, I want you to expect that we're going to treat you like an adult. And that if people don't do that, I want you to come see me. And then I'll fix it. And I would say that in front of my staff. I would say that in front of the coaches, as well as to all the new student athletes that were on campus. And I said, but part of what comes with being treated like an adult is that you're going to be held accountable. And so that's our job, is to help you develop as a person. And the way we do that is we hold ourselves accountable for the values that we espouse, and we're going to hold you accountable as well. So that's what we tried to do. And I'll give you an example. So we had ice hockey at Northeastern, both men and women's, and it was a very important sport for us, as it is at Canisius. And so I had a female student athlete who was one of my favorites, who was a real leader on campus, and she was a senior. She came in and she said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay, come on in. And she said, you always talk about how you value everybody and that everybody should be treated with respect and all that. Why are the women's hockey team not getting the same practice times as the men? Why do the men always get the practice time that's favorable and we have to go and work around them? And I said, okay. Now, so that's part of what I said. I said, we're espousing certain values, and if you don't feel like we're being consistent with that, I want you to let me know. Well, she came in and she let me know. And I said, that's a really good question. Let me ask some questions and I'll get back to you. So what I did was I had the two coaches come in, men and women. And I said, what's going on with the scheduling for practice in the rink? And so the men's coach, who was a really good friend of mine, and he says, well, that's historically always been the time for the men. I said, okay. And then he said, and if we end up now starting to share the time with the women, that's going to get out there and we're going to get killed in recruiting. So I said, okay, what part of that excuse do you think is going to resonate with me, given what you know about me? And he smiled, and I said, we're supposed to be doing these things on behalf of the student athletes, not at their expense. So I want you both to go talk to the academic advisors and find out what's the best time frames for the students to practice, and then I want the class times to drive the practice schedule. Okay? That's the last time I want to have that conversation. And so sure enough, they did. So much for the men feeling like they were going to have a disadvantage. They've won numerous bean pots. They've won the Hockey East. They've gone to the NCAA tournament. They got 14 guys in the NHL right now. It didn't hurt us. We make that stuff up. And for me, that was about leadership and about living your values. And so that's a good example of that stuff that Nick is talking about. You got to empower young people to have a voice and then respect them enough to listen.
Before we get to another question I have for you, Nick, I want to say that women's sports, it isn't only, and all sports, isn't only about basketball and football. We have in the audience Jody Meals here, who's the president of BCI. She's part of two generations of women who have excelled in the women's dance program at Ohio State. I want to salute her for that. That's important sports as well. I think we'll all agree. That's made a huge contribution to her family, and it's just part of the whole panoply of this whole thing. Quick question. I was struck by what you were talking about betting. We've had, I counted, 36 questions. 31 of them are about betting. Is it totally out of control?
Yes.
Okay, next question. No. I've known you for too long. You're going to go on and on. Go ahead.
Thank you for your question.
Seriously, and I just feel like we're family here, and I don't mean that disingenuously. I really mean, think about it. Baseball players are getting death threats right now, and most of them you're not hearing about because we heard about prop bets from Andrew. You're a kicker. Think about it. You can write your own script. Guy's trying to make money because his family is having problems. You've heard statistics, right? 57%, I think it is, of this country is within a couple paychecks of being in real serious trouble, right? Or being able to access $1,000. So suddenly this guy, let's say, whoever it is, Sam Smith, and he's got to make a payment. And so he just knows that Nick Lowry's going to make this kick. And he's going to make a kick in the fourth quarter.
That's a pretty good bet, though, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
But my point is this. Nick Lowry goes out and tries the best to make that kick, and this time he doesn't make it. Now there's a guy waiting in the parking lot because his life is over as he sees it. His value system may, unfortunately, be that skewed. But I see that happening. So what's really dangerous now, besides the prop bets, the individual things that lead to one little thing that you do that's harder to probably prove that was done, but also just the overwhelming now familiarity and incestuous nature of it in stadium betting. It's just so much. We had FBI agents talk to us in preseason camp talking about, never talk to them. When I was playing for the Jets, I had some guys, from New Jersey and from Long Island. And Nick, I'm your buddy here. I buy you a drink. How about Rob Moore? How's that pulled hamstring? You have to be cagey a little bit. People want to get to know you sometimes, very often more than you'd like to admit for the wrong reasons. But today it's 10 times worse. And it's so hypocritical that we were indentured, we were conditioned to say this is the worst thing, we have to stay away from it. Now it's in the locker room, or it's as close to being in the locker room as possible. So, I mean, you look now, they have a thing now where when you leave the stadium, you go through that little gauntlet of season ticket holders that paid extra just so they could high-five Patrick Mahomes as he's coming off the field. There's this intimacy now they want. They pay for the intimacy. So those two things together, intimacy with the players and the huge monetary threat of gambling, is a potent and toxic mix.
I just want everybody to know, though, that when you leave the stadium, there's no group waiting to high-five the sports writers. No, so this is probably...
Signaling you, but
Yeah, that's
they're
right.
signaling you, but they're not high-fiving.
So you in this audience probably figured out that the three of us were in college together. In fact, Nick and I are fraternity brothers. I have a special relationship with Steve. He is the president, of Canisius, and my wife was a 1976 graduate of Canisius and a member of its board. And so I get to read all of the stuff you send to her.
That's supposed to be confidential.
All that propaganda. And I will say that he never asks for a dime. But just today or yesterday, you sent a note about the values and education and the Jesuit tradition and how they all come together at Canisius. When you hear stories like this from Nick, and you hear these other stories, how do you keep the values at the front of sports?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I believe in leading by example, and so it is not good enough. And Peter shared a really good example about the student athlete, right? His expressing the values for the department, and the student athlete who held him accountable to that and drove a change. That's what leadership is. Right? And so the values of the institution, and for us at Canisius, they flow from a 500-year-old tradition that was started by Ignatius of Loyola. And so our values are very clear. And it is, for me, a steady drumbeat throughout the organization, in everything I say, in everything I do. This is who we are. And we cannot and will not compromise. Because when you start compromising on your values, that is when your organization, whatever as large as it is, as small as it is, right? Your family, right? When you start compromising on your values, your unit, however big or small, starts to crumble. And it may be the very little things that you think, well, no one will notice. So that, for me, we begin and end at Canisius with our Jesuit values. That is the inherent human dignity of every person. And so when we talk about our student athletes going out there and competing, there is an expectation. Compete hard, play fair, but the person in the opposite colors, they are not an enemy. They are your brother, your sister, and you. They are a human being. So, and our student athletes know the likelihood is I may or may not be in the gym or on the field. I may be somewhere. I may see it myself. I may hear about it, and they don't want that, right? I don't expect my student athletes to, or my coaches, to be going after the refs, right? That's not who we are. I do want to say one thing about gambling, because Nick talked about it in the professional context. But just imagine, right, on a college campus, like you don't need to go far to run into a student athlete on a college campus. And is he limping? Is he going into the training room? Right? How is he in class? How is she in class? Did she break up with her boyfriend? Like what? And they're 18 to 22 years old. And the focus and the pressure, for no other reason. Roommates, classmates. The NCAA used to have a campaign, don't bet on it, right? Don't bet on college sports, out the window. The amount of money in gambling now, it is so dangerous. so dangerous. And it is one of those things that is pulling at the thread of our value system, slowly pulling at the thread. And if we do not pay attention, we risk something really catastrophic.
I think all four of our visitors here have had something profound to say about their own lives and about values and about sports and how they all can connect. So I want to thank all four of them, one in absentia. But I have some other people to thank who are recognized in the audience. I already pointed out Tracy D'Angelo and Jody Meals. Between them is sitting Alan Block, who's the chairman of BCI, and I want to thank and salute him. There's Jeff Shook, president of our cable division. Bill Lamb, who runs WDRB, which is our company's TV station in Louisville. Kim Bates, and I know a great editor when I see one. And of the many great things you have here in Toledo, from Tony Pacco to the Mud Hens to Biblos to all the stuff you have, and one of the great distinguishing characteristics is that this is the place where Kim Bates is the newspaper editor. I want to thank her as well. Also, Allison Latcherin, who's the senior director of marketing, and my great friend Bill Southern, who is my chauffeur today and who takes care of all of the finances at the Post-Gazette, and I think at the Blade as well. You're very lucky here in Toledo to have all these people of the very, very highest class, the very highest caliber. But mostly I want to thank all of you, and to say especially to you, Nick, I'll tell you a story. At one of my reunions, a young woman came up to me, the kind of woman I was probably afraid to talk to when I was an undergraduate. She said, "I didn't think you were that interesting when you were in college. I didn't think you were that interesting at the fraternity house either. But I'm so glad we invited you. You have made an indispensable contribution, not only to the NFL record book, to the community of Kansas City, to Phoenix, where you now do so much great work, but to the general population of the United States. You are a great model, and so the last question goes to you. Give us a viewer's guide of Sunday's game.
Before I get to that, I just feel led, and I know this is a bit of an advertisement for Dartmouth, but there must be some kinship with the University of Toledo for hosting that. That's real leadership. I saw a picture. It's hard not to get emotional about it, but Buddy Tevens, our friend,
Great friend
was
of all
just
of us.
featured on ESPN, the Buddy Way, and one of the main things he said to his players was, when you're walking across campus and you see somebody who's not like you, that's the person you walk up to. You introduce yourself. You have to learn to meet people that are not like you. When you're in the Thayer dining hall, when you're sitting with all your teammates, leave that table, go over and sit with people that are not like you. Find out about them. Show interest. So for 3 summers, it's a beautiful thing, and actually there's a Dartmouth connection as well, something called Native Vision, which is now in its 28th year with Johns Hopkins. It's a mentoring program for Native American kids. For 3 summers, we did leadership training with minorities and non-minorities, mostly minorities, at Dartmouth. And Buddy, you know the right people, you know when they're just going to say yes because it's who they are. And here's a picture I hadn't seen in 15 years. And there's Buddy right in the back with all these kids who've just been part of this leadership training because he lived his values. And to me, what we can't lose in this, we talk about government and everything that's happened with government and is happening, right? But in the end, your great leadership, these are men of heart. Andrew, men of heart, is we continue to not lose the fact that every person we are supposed to be in charge of is a human being, is an individual, and we see them as individuals, we treat them as individuals, we see them as having unique God-given abilities, and that's where the beauty is. That's what higher education is, and that's what leadership is. And as long as we don't lose that, there is great hope. And I want to feel like I get to salute my friend Buddy, because We named the stadium at Dartmouth after him. Why do we name stadiums? It's not just because they won football games, because they won human beings to be better human beings. So there's my speech, but thank you. But I feel better for having known him. Now, Kansas City Chiefs, it's an interesting thing. We're going to win by 3 points, big surprise. The last drive of the game.
Not that that's important.
Not that that's important.
The 3 points is not
Don't bet
important.
on it.
Philadelphia, well, we won by 3 points against them last time, and I'm friends with Harrison Butker, and he did it last time. But Philadelphia is a great team. So what's going to be great about football, which, by the way, is 4 times more popular than baseball and basketball in the pros, is the competitiveness, the amazing combination of strategy, et cetera. Philadelphia has an incredible offensive and defensive line. They are really good. They're well coached. And then they have this monster running back named Saquon Barkley. For those of you that don't know, he's done things that people have almost never seen in the playoffs, right? But the Chiefs have that interesting thing, which is when you've got a culture of great leadership and humility. I used a phrase earlier, ego with a small e. Patrick Mahomes, confident as hell, but humble. Andy Reid, confident as hell, but humble. The whole organization never puts themselves ahead of everybody else. Isn't that what sports is supposed to learn, is to somehow transcend our own selfishness and narcissism, which is another subtext of all of this, is narcissism going to win out? So I see it happening because we've done 17 straight times. We've won in one-score game, and it's going to happen again because we've been there. And so it's going to be a phenomenal game. I think we should just celebrate the fact that it's 2 great teams, a great sport. It will go back and forth like the best script you can imagine, better than Hollywood. And then Patrick Mahomes is going to get it done.
Okay, so listen. So, to stretch a metaphor, we're in overtime here, I know. But he just said that football is the most important sport in America. Globally, what's the most important sport?
Football. That you actually play with your feet.
There you go. Thank you, everybody, and drive carefully.